And what I'd like to talk to you about is the information when we do receive it. And there's the age-old, am I making it up or aren't I? How do I know if I'm truly receiving something from Spirit? So I wanted to go into that with you. And when you're first initially opening up your intuitive abilities, taking those steps to receive from the universe, it can be really hard to understand, for it to be accurate, to understand if it's divinely guided information versus just wishful thinking or projections from others. So knowing when you're in alignment with the truth and being able to identify what that looks like is really key in being to honor your connection with your inner wisdom. So this is what I want to talk to you about tonight. Aside from that, ultimately, you know something is intuitive. There's sort of three ways of understanding that connection. So notice how it feels when you receive it. So in addition to any clairvoyant or clairaudient, you may also have received feelings. Does it feel aligned with your heart? And when I say that, it's because true intuition is divinely guided. Its highest interest is your soul's journey. So true intuition will always lead you in a direction that's part of that journey. Whereas if you're making it up, or if it's the ego, it perhaps takes you on a journey that you think you should be taking, or a journey that someone has told you you should be taking, as opposed to real spiritual truth. So generally, you need to compare the results from more than one intuitive experience to begin to validate your feelings. So this is where keeping track, when I teach the intuitive development course, one of the things I suggest is start to keep track of dreams, start keep track of insights, start keep track of things that just come to you, things that you know, and then just wait to see how they pan out, if they actually come alive, so to speak. And then you can reflect back on how that information was received. How did it feel? Did it make you feel inspired? Did it make you feel a nervousness or some kind of tingling that came with it? Or perhaps you felt nothing at all. Most often with me, if I'm not operating, so to speak, as a medium, but working intuitively, most of my intuition has zero feeling. There's absolutely no emotion attached to it at all. Not having that, so for example, if you have a mental image, what feeling, what words came along with it, if anything? And this becomes sort of that double validation. If I don't feel something, but I also get a visual, for me, this is one of the ways I understand it's intuition. And it sort of backs it up. One of the other things that you can do is validate this with another person that you can trust. And I always say trust. Not everybody is always supportive of us when we're on our intuitive path. It is, it's a unique path, to say the least. So if you do have someone that's trusted, someone that you can open up to, a friend, perhaps a family member, you can do the sharing, if you will, of your impressions with a buddy, partner. One of the things you can do is hold items that belong to that person or someone in their family and begin to work with those items. So for example, if you're working with another partner who wants to work on their intuition, and you want to be able to share things that they can validate. So it's really important that it's something that they know the story about. You don't want to be sharing information about a great-grandparents 3 times removed that they never met, and therefore they can't validate information. Start to understand how it feels. how your intuition feels. So there you will start to see, if you haven't already noticed, that when you have those impressions or those thoughts about a friend, or you think about something that's going to happen and then it happens, and then you reflect back onto the moment and it's like, oh, I knew that, and how it felt and how that information came to you. And that really is practice. It's trial and error, and it can take some time. The point is to practice as often as you can, to be able to validate as often as you can. So that's one of the ways of doing it, is connecting with how it feels and connecting how the information comes to you. Now, feeling is obvious. You get a sensation, you get an emotion perhaps, but the other thing is seeing how and where that information came from. And when I say that, it literally is how and where it came from in your brain. So when I'm working, if information comes from up this direction for me, I understand this is information that the person just needs to know. I don't necessarily know where it's coming from or whom it's coming from, shall we say. Same side and further down, if I'm seeing, I understand that Spirit is giving me the opportunity to see something that's actually going on in their life and in present tense. So it's important to start understanding where and how the information is coming to you and how it feels. The other thing you can do that helps clarify is, I'm going to say, sort of reboot your energy field, clear your aura, if you will, and remove any sort of variable emotions that are coming into play. So when you want to work with your intuition, you're going into practice, which is something that should become a ritual for you, especially in the beginning. You want to be able to tap into that inner wisdom. In order to do that, we have to be clean. We have to be cleared energy, if you will. So working with your chakra is a good way of doing it. A meditation to clear your third eye. There are some meditations on our group here that you can access, but there's tons more than I can probably ever provide for you on YouTube that help you connect with that third eye, help you clear your crown chakra, your throat chakra. These three, anything above the heart chakra particularly, is really important when it comes to our intuition, because they're the chakra that connect us to our higher source. And then once we've sort of taken the time to center ourselves, to clear that energy, we sort of tune back into our intuition. And when it comes out the same as it did prior to doing that, you get the repeat information. It feels the same as it did before. You're likely looking at things from an intuitive perspective. So this is just like running tests or analytics or of trial and error. So really keeping track of how things came to you, how they feel, what impressions you got, whether or not you smelled things, saw things, heard things, feel things, all of those things, and then waiting for these things to sort of manifest themselves, and then being able to go back and see and validate whether or not they came to truth for you. The fundamental difference between receiving from your ego and receiving from your intuition is how the information presents itself. True intuition comes and it is there to protect your soul's journey, nothing more, nothing less. The other thing that is important to remember is, if it is the ego will tell you a story, and it will tell you a story 10 times over to convince you that it's right. That's rule number, or sort of clue number one, is if you're getting the same thing, but you're getting it 10 different ways and there's no consistency, then this is why you understand that it's the ego as opposed to your true intuition. That fundamentally are sort of the two things. I want to talk about actually developing those abilities. The development process for intuitive, psychic abilities, mediumship, just spiritual abilities, for different reasons, we develop them at different times in our life, different experiences, especially things like when if you sense that there's mediumship abilities, those are something you're either born to or you're sort of catapulted into with some type of experience, something that pushes you into that. Intuition we're all born with. It's a matter of tapping into it. It's a matter of learning to work with it and going from there. So I want to talk to you about the different steps, because often we have them when we're quite young, we connect with them, and then we sort of forget about them. We tend to open up a little bit later on in life, and it's usually when all of a sudden our life affords us space and freedom. And all of a sudden we realize all these years we've been working on our intuition and we've just noticed. Another is a moment, perhaps I'm going to say, of hardship where we start to develop our gifts. I know there's a lot of meditating, there's a lot of prayer, there's a lot of asking and questioning and asking for signs. It's going to be okay. The fact of the matter is you already know the answer to that. It's in you. It's that wisdom that's deep within you. And part of your intuition is growing to trust that. Ask for a sign if you need it, and then leave it alone and just know. The more trust, the more acceptance of your intuition, the higher your vibration, the stronger your connection to your higher source is. Developing those gifts is really a matter of discovering self. It's discovering what's already in there for us. So there's 5 stages of psychic development that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. So stage 1 is the excitement stage, I call it, when we start noticing that we're getting, hits or we're getting things right. There's that excitement. In this stage, we become overwhelmed and we want to gather all the information out there and anything and everything that's possible that's got to do with intuition or psychic ability. We start going to events and reading books, and suddenly we become so overwhelmed. And the whole time that we're out there searching for all this intuition, there's constant validation, there's constant synchronicities. All of these are happening at the moment, but we don't see them because we're so caught up in the excitement of it all. And all of a sudden, you can't learn enough, you can't feel enough, you can't know enough. Eventually, most of this sort of settles down. We come back into alignment with ourselves, and then we sort of step gracefully, so to speak, into the next step. The next step is Sec 2, which is what I was talking to you about tonight. So this is the phase where we're in complete denial, so to speak, complete doubt. We went through sort of that honeymoon phase of our intuition, and now we're at a stage where all of a sudden we're doubting anything and everything. The logical mind is telling you that it's not true, to doubt yourself. All of a sudden you start perhaps feeling guilty. What were you thinking? Where were you going with this whole idea? How could you possibly be able to do this? We start comparing ourselves to, mediums or psychics on TV or people we know. So be careful. Take everything that you've learned with really a heightened level of awareness. And when I say that, accept that that's truth. Don't fall back into that trap of wondering or doubting yourself. Doubting and a limiting phase is just really a growing pain, and it can certainly be remedied, if you will, or worked through just simply by continuing to practice and continuing to exercise and start to really trust yourself and put yourself to the test. You really have to work through this phase, and there's not much you can do about it other than please don't give up, because it's just a stage and it's growing pains. So the validation stage is 3. We've talked about that, but this is where we want to start working through the doubting Thomas stage, or if you will. And it's like, okay, enough. I'm going from here on in, as of today, I'm going to trust myself. So we move into that validation stage where we start to, again, share our thoughts with someone else, share our gifts, if you will, in a more productive way. We start to look to help people. We start to intentionally tap in to share information. And we're looking for, at this point too, physical evidence in the world around us. So we may receive perhaps energetic vibes as messages, psychic messages, just, general spiritual insights. Nonetheless, you receive it. And you begin to start moving out of that once we start to trust and see that validation, and we start to get that faith in ourselves. During the validation, I want you really to pay attention to the earlier steps, as the feedback is really, really important. So don't look for feedback from someone who is not interested in this, or who doesn't believe in this, or can't connect to that higher self, so to speak, because they're going to pick it apart. They're the people that want a complete paragraph that's 100% accurate in details with full punctuation, and that doesn't happen. Step 4 is sort of the process and the method stage. So this is the stage where we start to find out what works for us. It's what we believe in and what we have found to be true. So it's part of the validation stage, and it's the feedback from the validation stage. So that can come in sort of tangible feedback. It's from keeping track in your book. It can be working with a partner, but this can also come from your guides, your spirit team, if you will, in the universe. Ask them for synchronicities. Ask them to validate what you're thinking. Ask them to help support you in this growth, because the more intuitive you are, the more in touch with yourself, the more connected you are to them, and that is something that they want, because they're here for you to help you in your soul's journey. So if they can communicate and connect and get those messages across to you, it just makes it easier. So you begin to learn how, as I mentioned, how information comes to you. It's your dictionary, is what I call it. And I always joke that, I have a big 3-foot deep dictionary I carry around on my shoulder. And trust me when I say 25 years later, I'm still adding to that dictionary. I added to the dictionary this week, as a matter of fact. And what I mean by that is Spirit will work with symbols, you will get visuals, perhaps. And part of this processing, part of the method stage of stage 4 that you're going through, is starting to determine what those things mean. So for example, if I see a calendar, I know it's an anniversary, that there's an important family date. So the first thing I do is I notice that I see a calendar, and then I ask Spirit to validate. I ask Spirit for more information, and then I get more information. But don't think for a second it wasn't years and years of trial and error to understand what it means when I see a calendar. What does it mean when, a pet comes and sits on the right side of me or the left side of me, the difference. And for your information, the left side is always masculine, so it would be a male dog. It would be your dad's side or the male side of the family, this the female side. And that's trial and error over time. I will tell you this, the more I begin to trust, the more you begin to trust these signs, these symbols that you're receiving, the more you're going to get, because they know you understand. and it's not trying to figure out that language with you anymore. The fifth and final stage, so to speak, is the assimilation stage. And in this final stage, you begin to integrate what you've learned in, so to speak, your psychic research by talking, by listening, by understanding, for example, how I work and looking at how you work, watching TV shows, reading books, all of those things. But you start to integrate that information into your own intuitive development journey. And what this means is you take what works for you. There is no one perfect way of doing this or learning this. There is no one book that can give it all to you. I can't even provide everything. I can only share my experience, what I've learned. Some of it will resonate with you and work for you. Some of it won't. And some of it, we just have to fill those pieces in ourselves. And that's the hardest part. But all in due time, so to speak, you find yourself more and more comfortable where you are in your path. As you go forward, just start to pay attention, notice what you see, start to learn to trust it, start to put those pieces together of what things mean, and start to get validation, and then you come into that final stage of sort of integrating it into what your toolbox, what your intuitive or psychic toolbox looks like. So the principles, the facts, the beliefs that you collected all start to make sense in your life, in your intuitive life, and you begin to sort of live that intuitive aligned space, which is really part of our spiritual and our soul's journey, is to be aligned with our higher self. And there is absolutely no better way of doing that than working with your own intuition, because your intuition really is a direct line of communication to your higher self being your soul. So I will leave that information with you. I hope that it helps clarify. I would consider or suggest that you look at what stage you're at now and just accept that there are stages and the different things that you can do with it. So I hope this was informative. I hope it's helpful. And I certainly, above all, hope it's encouraging to you to continue your own journey of intuition. So thank you for listening.